So this is a short video to explain the significance of the title of Mice and Men. It's really key, I think, in matching to the themes in the novel and the major concepts and also the events in the novel, the characters and why they act the way they do. The title is really well chosen and particularly apt, so this is a video to explain this. I try to teach students to be more like a synthesizer, not a regurgitator. So a synthesizer takes in great ideas and can adapt to play different sounds. It can be completely adaptable. It doesn't just copy what is inputted into it. It can be tweaked and modified to produce different things. And I think good students are like that also, taking in different ideas, but then eventually producing something amazing from their own mind. So any questions, please contact me using these details. The first thing I want to do in terms of explaining the title is a scenario which is, and you can see from the image there, which is winning the lottery. So if you take it back a little bit before you've won the lottery, you can imagine a scenario where you are walking down the road and you're minding your own business, but you're happy with your life. It's not perfect. You haven't achieved everything you might have wanted to achieve, but you are happy. You're happy and you're content. So it's kind of an equilibrium. And that's 5 out of 10. You might not be a millionaire, you might not have a mansion, but you might have done something nice for someone, and you might just be enjoying life. Then someone comes up to you, maybe a friend, and they tell you you've won the lottery. Or you check your ticket and you feel like you've won the lottery. Then you start to dream, you start to think about all the things you would do, the house you would buy, the car you would buy, the films, the Blu-rays, the trainers, whatever it is you're into. You start to make plans, you start to think about how great life could be. And so maybe in that dreaming process, your level of contentment raises because you can just imagine how amazing life is going to be for you, how easy life will be for you. And then the key question that I want to sort of postulate really is, if you then find out that you haven't won the lottery, do you feel worse than you did when you were at your equilibrium? Or do you feel like the equilibrium? Do you feel even worse than before when you find out that your dream hasn't come true? Does the fact that you dreamed and then that dream didn't come true, does it lower your satisfaction? And that's really, I think, a scenario that links in quite nicely with the ideas in Of Mice and Men. So Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck. What is the significance of the title? Let's bring it back to the details of the novella. Well, the title derives from a poem by the 18th century Scottish poet Robert Burns. And essentially, in a summary, the poem is about a mouse that built a nest, and that nest is destroyed by a ploughman, maybe unsuspectingly, but the mouse has really tried to build a beautiful house and it's just all been in vain. And here's the man who wrote the poem himself, looking sharp. And this is the extract from the poem. The poem's much longer, but this is an extract. And it says, "But Mousie, thou art know thy lane, in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men gang aft agly, and leave us with naught but grief and pain for promised joy." I think it's beautiful. It really is a nice piece of poetry. And a modern translation would look something like this. "But Mousie, you are not alone in proving that planning ahead is futile or pointless. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go wrong, and leave us with nothing but grief and pain instead of promised joy." And the reason I put the most important message there is because I do believe that word "instead" is really key. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go wrong. Things don't go the way we plan. And instead of having that dream, you're left with nothing but grief and pain instead of promised joy. So that dreaming is replaced by something much worse than that. And had you not dreamed, there wouldn't have been something to be replaced. So it's an interesting concept. Another key thing when I teach is I try to get students to always think about the big picture ideas that I call them, the big picture, which means, what is the real reason that the author wrote this text? What messages are they trying to convey? What are they trying to make you think about? What questions are they trying to get the reader to answer? So if you look at the title, you think about, what is Steinbeck's title suggesting about the usefulness of dreaming and making plans? It's called Of Mice and Men. You've seen the reference, so let's think about some of the questions it asks. Does the title suggest that we shouldn't strive for better and perhaps we should lower our aspirations? I think that's a really interesting idea, which is really counter to the messages you get told in society at the moment. You get told if you work hard, you can achieve anything you want to. You know, we have the kind of X Factor culture where your dreams can come true overnight, but this novel might be suggesting something different. Number 2, is the title suggesting that animals and humans are both similarly unable to control our destiny? There is something in it being called Of Mice and Men. It's about animals and humans being thrown into the same lot, us existing together. We feel we are more evolved and a higher form in terms of intelligence, but this title suggests that, you know, we're the same as the mice. The mice are just trying to build a better house, but it doesn't happen that way. And really, as a title, as a message, even pessimistic or simply realistic, is something to be considered. Now, if we take a good example, if you look at a character like Crooks, you can see how the title really links in with the themes and the characters in the novel. So Crooks has been said by many to have a conversion from cynicism to optimism to realism. In chapter 4, it's a perfect example of how a failed dream can leave you feeling worse than before. So those are some great key words whilst I'm at it. Cynicism, optimism, realism. Those are key vocabulary to use if you're ever asked a question about the title. And when I teach, I try to get students to visualize what Crooks's chapter 4 looks like in terms of his happiness. So I say to students, can you draw a graph of Crooks's happiness in the chapter and get them to plot the events of the chapter and then think about how happy he is. And often what students will do, they say he starts at the bottom. Then when he starts to think about the dream, he moves down there. And then by the end, after he's been brought back down, he's a bit lower than he was here. But he's back to a reasonable position. And this graph here kind of says the same thing as well. Okay, but what you get is the lineament. You get that he rubs his back at the beginning and end of that chapter. And I think this is a much better representation of Crooks's happiness in chapter 4. And this student has drawn that he starts kind of in the middle, like the equilibrium I was telling you about. Then he starts to explore the dream, and it talks about how he explores his spine, maybe in hope. I always think that's a metaphor for hope. But this is the key thing. I think that by the end of this chapter, after Curly's wife has brought him right back down to earth so crudely, so viciously, he actually ends up in a worse position. It's so painful to watch. And I think that him, as we've talked before, well, your teacher would have told you before, I would have told you before, his lineament is a visual metaphor for the fact that he's made no progress. He's just like that mouse, or I don't know what it is, a rodent on a wheel, trying to get somewhere but achieving nothing. And I think it's even worse than that. Instead of him just going around, he'd actually be lowering himself, I think, in a different or a more accurate representation of his pain in that chapter. And I think to take it to its furthest degree is to really understand John Steinbeck as a non-teleological thinker. Now, teleology is a study of design or purpose in natural phenomena. Or number 3, it's a belief in the perception of purposeful development toward an end, as in nature. The idea that we are destined to be something great, or that we can affect our fate if we make certain decisions or work hard or dream or whatever it might be. And that's really a creationist point of view. Whereas a more evolutionary thinker might say, well, you know, we can't really affect change in terms of human evolution by the actions that we do. It just happens over time. And John Steinbeck was a non-teleological thinker. So to explain that in a bit more detail, or with a more useful metaphor, that's why I had the Queen's Park Ranger badge there. Apart from them being a fantastic team, the best team in the world, best football team in the world, and my team. If you're a teleological thinker, you would think that if you're a footballer, you would think that if you practice every day and you do kick-ups and you do step-overs and you try and do around the world and all the different tricks, you would get better, and that one day you might be a professional footballer and a fantastic footballer. But if you're a non-teleological thinker like John Steinbeck, you would just enjoy playing football and you wouldn't try to get better. You would just enjoy the process, just having a kick around with your mates maybe. So a non-teleological thinker like John Steinbeck believes there is no overall plan to life, believes it's pointless trying to change our destiny, and would not have like conventional religious faith. It's really interesting to note that this novel was initially called Something That Happened, which is just a statement of fact. What happened to George and Lenny was just something that happened. It happens to lots of people, and that's just life. But he eventually chose Of Mice and Men. I think it had something to do with his dog eating the manuscript and things getting changed, or some kind of ironic twist of fate. But the title of Mice and Men is much more negative than Something That Happened. Something That Happened is almost neutral, it's just that's life. Whereas Of Mice and Men is saying don't plan, don't hurt yourself, don't put yourself in a position where you make yourself more vulnerable by having these false dreams. And in our society, I think it's something, it has some credibility in the sense that maybe we are always striving to compete with someone else, or to become that millionaire or that billionaire or that trillionaire, to have the car and the jewelry or whatever it is that our society deems we should have. But actually, if we just enjoyed our lives and didn't plan, maybe we might be happier. We might not have a house, but we might be happier. So that, for me, really explains the title. I hope it's been helpful. Please let me know what you think.